Hello and welcome. I've got Eric Wellman here, band director from Joliet West High School, and Kirk Hickman, band director here from Hinsdale South High School, which I said correctly the first time and didn't have to start re-recording it there. Welcome to e-learning. Welcome to my kitchen and everything it has to offer here in the background. We'll paint soon, I'm sorry. So as I said, I got two band directors here, but specifically, your guys' main instrument is percussion. And I thought as we're going into this e-learning and remote learning, if I could talk to both of you and maybe get some tips for some students at home to practice on percussion. And this might be something that percussionists are already used to, because I would guess that most percussionists don't own timpani, don't own keyboards, big keyboard instruments, don't own chimes, don't own huge stuff in their homes, yet they're expected to, of course, prepare their parts. So Kirk, why don't we start with you? What's life like for a percussionist to practice at home? What are some things that you could do right now to keep those skills going?
Well, I think for me, at least when I was growing up, I didn't own a drum set until I was well into high school. And, we just learned to play. Like, I learned drum set in the back seat of my mom's car, playing on headrests. And, I think it was a 80s Ford Fairmont, which was a quality automobile. But you can get a lot of, coordination done just with limited resources. And, for me, as, even just working on snare drum chops, you really don't get a lot better than just having a towel and sticks and working on your stick control and working on your dexterity and working on just that you can double bounce well and build up those exercises. Same with form out marimba. You're never too good not to work on your form out permutations. And you can do that just on any surface. You can do it on a floor. You can do it on a wall. You can do it wherever you need to, and really develop a lot of chops and skills that way. It's one of those things as a percussionist, you kind of always know you should be working on it, but you aren't necessarily always are putting that attention into it.
And when we're talking about, any surface like that, you're saying towels, you're saying floors, basically anything that mom and dad says is okay.
Within reason.
We can hit that there.
Yeah, don't play on the cat, but yeah.
and when we're talking about maybe specific exercises, are there any, exercises that you could suggest right from the start? Let's say, let's do junior high and then high school. If you're a junior high snare drum player, what's an exercise you could do right now at home on the floor on a towel?
Well, I say if you're talking junior high and I'm working on my snare drum technique, I want those kids building up just a simple double beat, double beat or Phil Collins, whatever you call it, and just building up that double stroke and that bounce catch. And that's a great towel exercise if kids are still learning that technique. However you call it, chicken and roll or huggabers, one enda roll, one enda roll, one enda, two enda roll, etc. Those are great exercises for building it, and then working it off the left hand. You're never too good to move on from the George Stone book, Stick Control, and just working on the stick control and working on your coordination and dexterity. For four mallet marimba, it's a little advanced junior high and high school, but working on for mallet permutations, just combinations of the four mallets: 4 3 2 1, 1 2 3 4, 4 2 3 1, etc. Just making your own combinations.
And then high school, what do you suggest?
For high school kids, moving into, again, you can always get into stick control. They'll always have good stuff to do with that. Especially in later pages. I'm a big fan of the book Developing Dexterity by Mitchell Peters. You can track down some PDFs of that. And then Accents and Rebounds, also by George Stone, another amazing resource. For your four mallet permutations, same thing. I think that's right in that high school wheelhouse. And those are just technique things kids can do really simply right away.
Absolutely. Eric, hello, welcome.
Good morning.
You're like what Kirk said, right?
That's right.
What about you? Anything to add to that? Maybe going back to the start of it, some techniques or maybe some things that you did growing up to practice without big instruments at home.
Yeah, I would totally agree with Kirk. I mean, nothing develops that strength and and just your hands like playing into a pillow or playing into a, a thick towel. If you can do it there and then you hit that drum head, man, it's like, wow, life is pretty easy now. But like Kirk said, you got to kind of do the work. And I think you can kind of manipulate pretty much anything, to for students, especially now that we're not in class. So in all of those like basic rhythm sheets, 1E and a 2 and 1E and a 2 and then just have them write their own solos or add diddles or add flams, to it based on where they are, so you'll have the kids that'll add a little bit, and then you'll have the kids that'll add too much. So you got to rein them in a little bit. But yeah, I think we are lucky. When I was growing up, I was lucky enough to have an upstairs. I was the youngest, so everybody was out of the house. So I was just upstairs cranking, Louis Bellson over the speakers, and just playing along on my drum pad or on my pillow. Like Kirk said, most kids don't have a drum set until later, but you can always set stuff up, and play on whatever, you have at home, and then just ask for forgiveness and not permission from your parents.
Well, and both of you were pretty good at sending me some percussion resources that are out there right now. Eric, in particular, like I've gotten quite a few emails from you. Are there any that you recall right now that you could recommend for some directors out there to send to their kids?
Yeah, you know what I really like, and I use this with my percussion kids when we're in school. Vic Firth's website has a lot of excerpts and not excerpts, but exercises that they can use. I really like the one they do with rudiments. All the 40 rudiments are up there. Kids can play them with a click track on their computer, and there's like 4 or 5, 6 different tempos they can do. So over time, they can speed up, speed up, speed up. There's some drum set play along stuff. C. Allen is blasting out a bunch of free stuff about once a week, just little solos for snare drum and marimba. And then a roll off, I think they call it routine of the day. They've got some solos. So it's kind of nice as percussionists. All these places are, blasting that stuff out for us, and the kids can just play along.
And Kirk, you had some good suggestions there where you're saying the George Stone books, etc. Anything else to add to Eric's suggestions there?
I think, Eric, as a advanced percussionist, always has great ideas. But I also think, metronomes are phenomenal. And I also encourage kids to play along with actual music. There's a couple resources out there where it's, play along tracks for drummers. Matt Black, who's formerly Marian Catholic High School, now with Carmel, he's got a great list of like a Spotify playlist they use in his percussion classes just for tunes to play along with at a nice pulse and great beat. I think that's really key to get kids away from, just a click all the time. And like we use metronomes in my class every day, every hour. But if you start to get into, now we're going to play along with music, I think that changes the game for kids. And also not to ignore, like if you've got a kid that's not a great mallet player, well, now is a great time to give them those reading resources. Just simple Google searches for like Brian Wiss's note reading games and things like that. They're great resources to help develop those skills. And if you got kids that aren't great snare drummers, walking them through some simple stick patterns. Here's how stickings go. I'm a big fan of sticking patterns for kids. I think it really helps their musicianship. It helps their coordination and dexterity. And now's a great time to put the work in. Also, if you have the ability, I use a lot of duets with kids, just putting them into A group and B group. So now when we're in this e-learning, we put our kids into Soundtrap, which is doing free demos, and where they would do duets with themselves on Soundtrap. So just an easy snare drum duet, and you're going to play the A part and the B part and record it. And that just, again, gets them from the click metronome, which is key, but also finding where their internal pulse is and how they play with another musician, and in this case, themselves.
Well, and this sounds like it'll be a great episode for me just to put a ton of links in the description of this video as well, because I remember you mentioning Soundtrap to me, and we're hearing Vic Firth. I'm glad you brought up the metronome. I was going to ask that. I mean, I figured it went without saying, like, it's really easy to find a free metronome on an app or online right now. But I also was going to ask, and I'm glad you brought that up as well, about playing along with real music. and I think our kids are exposed to a lot of band music. But
Mhm.
I don't know. Can I get putting you on the spot? I didn't prep you for this, but can I get maybe a top 3 or so of,
Yeah.
of just good things to play along with now, whether it's a Beatles tune or maybe something a little newer than that? Kirk, go ahead.
Well, my kids are not a fan of my playlist, but I will say that one of the go-to ones for me is the late 90s, early 2000s 311. Always has kind of multiple tempos and solid pulse, which is a good deal. I'll also like to throw them back to some Billy Ocean in the 80s, and that'll always be a classic for the kids. You can go through some dance tunes, and if you just look through like an Apple dance tune playlist, you'll find something that they'll be nicely frustrated with, that it's like, this is a song my mom likes, and then you're drumming to it in class. That's a good one.
Eric, what about you?
I'm a big fan of having the kids play along with AC/DC, especially if they're practicing drum set, because you don't have to worry about a lot of fills. And it's like Kirk said, I have them crank music. That's what I did as a kid, and they're on those click tracks in the studio, so they're not moving. So if you're not playing with them, it's not the recording's fault. So then you can really hear what's going on. And then as they get older too, like if you're thinking about drum set, then they can start. You got kids that are listening, like, hey, I should play this here, even if it's just taking their hand from the right side to the left side, So I know we said it already, but we're pretty lucky as percussionists, what we're able to do with stuff that's already out there.
Yeah, and you guys are, again, as I mentioned at the beginning, probably used to this a little bit by now, but maybe some of us, especially me, just kind of needed that information. Eric, I was not surprised at all that you suggested AC/DC. I'm not sure why, but there's that. Kirk, I was a little surprised at your suggestions, but that's okay.
You're welcome. Well, I was going to say, if you've got kids that are working on drum set, I always think it's an essential skill. And my buddies and I used to do this all the time growing up. But trade fours with yourself. And if you're using a program like Soundtrap, my jazz drummers had this assignment to record themselves trading fours, and they were the opposite part. So they'd start with 4 measure time, 4 measures solo. Then on their second take, they do 4 measures solo, 4 measures time. And then they'd have to like play along with that other track, again, listening to another musician. Also, that gets them into hearing like, man, I play the same solo every time. And we got to talk about like, here's a variety of drum solos. You can do a start and stop, which is more melodic material, a time-based solo, a cymbal-based solo, rolls and toms, so you get into them hearing in themselves that they don't have a lot of variety in their playing.
And I'll embarrass myself. And if you're listening to the audio of this won't do much justice because it'll be video. Is it safe to say too, if you're doing drum set, like you can kind of back up and just do the like literally coordination, yes. Hitting your thigh, getting the bass drum, getting the hi-hat going at the same time. And I mean, you don't even need drumsticks for that at all.
No, you're fine. Yeah. And I think it's so much more coordination, conceptualizing what you're playing and going into that world.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to help me out and hopefully help a whole bunch of other students and teachers out.
No problem. Thank you, man.
Appreciate your time. Thanks.